Hello and welcome to a hopefully short tutorial in GrowFX about how to make a simple plant grow from a seedling. So this is what we're going to be going for. Notice I'm going to go to the path 1 slider and I'm adjusting its length, and all of the other properties kind of correspond with that initial path length. So this is what we're going to be doing today. Okay, so beside our example plant, I'm just going to create, and probably I'll have to go over some of the basics in GrowFX. It might be redundant for some people, but because it's sort of an advanced topic. But anyway, let's keep on going. First thing I'm going to do is create my GrowFX object, like that, and I'm going to create an initial path. And I'm going to bring up my tabs, the distributors, direction modifiers, and the mesh builder. And I like to put them in this order. Have a distributor first, a directional modifier second, and then mesh builder third, because that's really sort of how you build GrowFX plants. So I'm going to rename this from path 1 to, I suppose, stem. And the first thing I'm going to do, of course, if you're modeling a real life plant, you'd want to have reference and things to look at so that you know you're modeling the plant correctly. The first thing I'm going to do is assign a length to this path. Well, actually, I take that back. The first thing we're going to do is to assign the distributor to this first path. So we're going to click New and then go to Distributor, and we're going to click on the distributor. Okay. So now that's done, we're going to assign, I guess, the length of our fully grown plant is what we're going to be considering here when we set this length. So let's say that we're going to be growing a 4 foot tall plant. So let's input 4 feet there. Okay, so that's done for now. Now let's add another path, and these are going to be the branches coming off our initial path or our stem. And I'm going to create a new distributor for this, and I'm going to add a path distributor. Okay, now that that's done, on the distributors panel, we are going to add a path for for these to be distributed upon, and we're going to say stem because that's the only one there. And let's adjust the lengths of these. And when you adjust the lengths of your paths, generally what I try and do is sort of think of the longest that this will be. So I kind of look and say, like at the base, I know it's going to be this long, and these upper branches can be taken care of through effects, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a second. So anyway, I've made that. We're going to call this B1. And there you go. And so now in the distributors panel, I'm going to use the path position to affect the length of these first branches. So click path position, and then effects, and then I'm going to go to B1. So we're affecting the length of B1 using the path position of B1. And we're going to open that up and then go to length. And then that's going to open up our effects panel, and so we're looking at from 0 to 100%. This is where we're going to be setting the this effect from 0 to 100% of the length. So I'm going to click on the factor graph here, and what this is telling me right now is that here this represents your path position. So at your path position 0, this length is going to be at 1, or it will be 100% of 1 foot 2. So looking at it from the standpoint that this is your path position along this direction, and then this is your effect percentage. So bearing that in mind, let's kind of adjust our plant stem lengths here. So let's say we want these branches here to be a little bit longer. I'll add a point here, and then then I will adjust that point here, and you can see that those are getting longer. Now of course I'm adjusting by moving this one point. I didn't set an anchor point back here, so all this is moving, so you can see in your plant model that that everything's sort of moving. If you wanted to keep these bottom branches or these branches the same way you did that, you would add an anchor point here and then move that one. And the reason why I'm going over this, and I suppose in a pretty good amount of detail, is because I think that a lot of times people don't remember what these graphs stand for. I think they can be confusing to new users, but if you think about it logically, you think this is your position along the path, and then this is your factor percentage. It'll make a lot more sense, and you can do some pretty advanced things using the factor graphs. So anyway, that is kind of that. So now we've made our second path, and we've adjusted its length using the path position effects parameters. Now let's add the leaves. So add one more path, and we will call this leaves. And we are going to add leaves. We're just going to add it as a distributor onto the end of B1. So let's go to our distributors list. Let's go to path position distributor, and this is going to allow us to just put it directly on the end of B1 and hit OK. And when it's asking for a starting path here, we're going to click that, and we're going to hit B1, and let's add a position. So that's what we've done. And this is really long right now, so let's think of kind of the longest that we want our leaves to be. So in an ideal world, how big would our leaves be at full size? Let's say these are 4-inch leaves, and those look a little small. Let's make them 1-foot leaves. That's a big plant. Okay, so now that we kind of have this set up, we can start setting up our effects. I kind of briefly touched over sort of, one moment, how the effects work out when I was adjusting the leaves, and I mean the lengths in B1 using the path position. And really that's how effects work for the most part. It's all kind of done the same way. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, let's I suppose test out our plant right now. Like now it has a length of 4 feet, and if we just made the lengths made the length longer, things are just sort of appearing and it looks messy. It's not really anything like what we've done here, because you'll notice things sort of grow slowly here and a little more naturally. So let's try and do that with our plant that we're making. So on stem, the first thing we're going to do is as this stem grows, these little guys are going to pop out, and they're going to also get longer as the stem grows. So what we're going to need to do is go to B1, our first branching pattern, or our first branching path, and we are going to affect its length, and oops, I'm sorry, pardon me, I said that wrong. What we're going to do is we're going to make the length of the stem, disregard what I just said a few minutes ago. We're going to make the length of the stem affect the first branching path. So let's do that. So we're going to go to the length parameter under the stem. I'm going to click it, and we're going to say that the length of stem affects B1. I'm going to open it up to reveal its parameters, and it's going to affect B1's length. So let's hit OK. So now that opens up our effects panel, and our effects panel, just by default, it has for some reason 8'4", and I believe that's just because that's the default length given whenever you create a path. but let's make this specific to the path that we're looking at here. So let's say currently we have a length of 3 foot 11. I think we're going for a 4-foot plant. So in order to keep this factor graph accurate, we need to say from the shortest this plant can be, which is 0 inches, to the tallest this plant can be, which is 4 feet. This is, we're going to define the factors between 0 and 4. So just click on the open graph. Okay. So now looking at this graph, this is, I suppose, the factor percentage of length, and this going across is going to be the height of that path. So in here you have it 0 inches, and here you have what would be 4 inches. So you'll look at your factor graph, and what this is basically telling you is that at 0 inches the length of B1 is 0, and as your stem grows all the way up to 4 feet, the length of B1 becomes 100% of its length, or of its optimal length, the length that you specified when you made B1. So that looks okay. Let's just leave that for now, and let's grow that. So let's go to stem, and let's make the length of path smaller, and let's grow it back up again, and you can see that these are scaling now. Let's go to 4 foot. Okay, so that's it for B1. And now for the leaves, we need to do sort of the same thing. We need to make those correspond to the length of, we need to make the length of the leaves correspond to the length of their stalk, or B1. So we are going to go to B1 and go to the parameter length and go to the effects, and then go to leaves, and then go to length. So right now what we're telling the computer to do is we are saying that the length of B1 affects the length of the leaves. So right now again we have our default of 0 inches to 8 foot 4 inches, and that's not correct. So because B1 never reaches 8 foot 4 inches, it only goes up to 1 foot 2 inches. So let's change that, and let's say from 0 to 1 foot 2 inches. We will adjust it using this factor graph. So let's open that up, and right now what this factor graph is telling us, we're looking at this end, this is 0 inches, and going along the bottom this goes all the way up to 1 foot 2 inches, which is the path length that we specified. And then this line shows sort of the factor related to the length. So what this graph is telling us, it has 0 inches, it's at 0, the factor is at 0, and it goes all the way up to 1 as you reach full height. So, and let's just leave that as it is and just see what happens. So let's adjust our stem length. Okay, so what's happening here looks right. Your plant's really small and your little stems start growing, and at the end of the stems you have your leaves. And so let's zoom in a little bit. So when that first leaf kind of starts, the leaf begins to grow right when it first starts, and it's the length of the leaf corresponds again with the length of B1. Now let's say, just for an argument's sake, that you wanted B1 to grow a little bit before it actually sprouted a leaf. So what you could do there is you would go into, you can click on B1, you'd go into the length parameter up here in your direction modifiers, and you would go to the effects panel, and it's the only one there, so click that, and go into your factor graph. And what we want to tell the computer to do is we want there to be 0 growth in the leaves path until after the stem reaches a certain length. So we just grab this, we make a point, and we move that down to 0. So what we're telling it now is that the length needs to grow this amount, or 20%, and given your slider. And actually we can just type this in. So we want the leaf to grow, let's say 10%, or pardon me, we want B1 to be 10% of its total length before the leaf starts to grow. So under using the graph, we'll just type in 10 there. And so right now, if we grow our stem, you will notice that this leaf grows. The leaf path doesn't appear until B1 reaches 10%, and then it appears. So now we've kind of set up, I guess, sort of the skeleton of our growing plant. So let's start adding some mesh to it. Let's make the stem back up to its original height of 4 feet. And let's just add a little bit more foliage to this. So let's grab B1 and let's up the density. Okay. Well, now let's start adding mesh to this. Let's go to, I guess we'll start off making our leaves. Or no, actually let's start off making our stalks. So let's go to stem, and this the mesh builder panel, which we brought up earlier from down here. Let's add a mesh. Let's go to cylinder mesh and hit OK. This won't be visible until you click on viewport display meshes. Right now it's invisible because it turned off my line display, but that's okay. We'll get it back here in a second. Or we'll be able to see meshes here in a second. So right now I click the graph. I'm not sure why the mesh doesn't display immediately. GrowFX has always just kind of done that. Whenever you click the graph, you get your mesh display. Again, I'm not sure why that is. That's just kind of how GrowFX works. So here's your mesh. This looks really blocky. First thing we'll do, we'll up the amount of sides. Right now we have a minimum amount of sides of 4. Let's up this to like 8. And this radius graph that I just brought up, this is a representation. You could think about this as your mesh sort of cut in half. So along here, this is the length of your mesh, and here this is the radius of your mesh. So if you wanted it to say flare out at the base, you click there and pull that in, and you can kind of adjust the shape of your mesh, again considering that this is sort of 1/2 of your mesh, and make those adjustments if you want to. So anyway, we've added a mesh to stem. Let's go to B1. Let's do the same thing. Let's add a mesh, add a cylinder mesh, and let's up the sides to like 8. And right now it's very straight and straw-like. Let's make a taper at the end. So we'll open up the graph for radius. Click that there. And that base looks a little fat, so we'll bring that down. Okay, so now we kind of have a basic plant, the plant stems at least. So now let's start building the leaves. So let's go to the leaves. Well, first off, before we do that, let's look and see how this is growing. because now we have a mesh to look at. It's a little more accurate. We can see where our final product is going to be a little bit easier. So let's go to stem, and let's look and see what this does. And it looks okay until you get to this very end. And if you have ever seen a seedling grow, you'll know that it doesn't start from a little fat stump like that. It's actually, when it's short, the diameter is very small. So let's tell the computer to do that. So I'm just going to set our initial length back up to our total height of our plant. And so I'm going to tell the computer, we're going to go to the stem paths length parameter here. We're going to open our effects parameter, and we're going to tell it to adjust the radius using the length. So we're going to say the length effects stem and cylinder mesh. We're going to say the length affects the radius. And right now it's saying that it's going to affect it from 0 to 8'4". Again, we don't want that because our plant isn't 8'4" tall. Our plant is 4 foot tall. And I see that there are a lot of mistakes that are made when people make growing plants. This is one of the big ones. They have this wrong, and you'll get some errors if you do that. So make sure that you set this to the length of your path. So now we're going to adjust the factor using the graph. And this, actually, the defaults, it's okay. I mean, it says that whenever the stem length is 0, the radius factor is going to be 0, and on up till the radius factor is 1. So that's okay. So let's just leave that and click close. So now, whenever we grow our plant, and the plant's very small, the initial stem is very small as well. Okay. And you could also, if you wanted to, like let's say you thought these secondary stems were a little bit too fat, you could just say, you could adjust these as well. Now you could go to your stem branches, or your stem path. You can go to your length parameter. Oops. Click that again. You can go to your effects, and we want it to affect B1's radius. And 8'4" is not what we have. We have the total length is actually 4 feet, so we want to have this effect go from 0 foot to 4 foot. And click on our factor, and the default is fine. We discussed that earlier. The default's fine. So if we went to here, you can see that as the plant gets taller, the radius gets bigger on B1 as well. So finally, let's get to our leaves, and let's create them. So we'll go to our leaves path, and we're going to use, this time we're going to use the leaves mesh. Go to your mesh builders and create new, and go to leaves mesh. And that's going to create some leaves, and they're not great looking yet. Go to, we'll set the length of our path to, let's say, 1 foot. Yeah, we already said that earlier, so that's all fine. Leave that. And these are a little skinny looking, so we'll go under, in our mesh builders, we'll go to the width, and we'll up the scale factor. You can either up the scale factor, or you can use the graph. Upping the scale factor is sometimes just faster. So let's kind of shape these. Now let's say we want these to sort of have a ridge and look like real leaves. So we're going to look at our central angle here. Right now it's facing downwards. Let's bring that up. And that, your angle axis across is just sort of the initial angle that everything gets moved around. So right now well, we've changed our angle across. Let's go to our incremental angle across, which means the angle at each one of these loops. I guess that would be considered a loop. Not quite, but anyway, at each one of these stages or each one of these vertices across the body of the leaf. And so let's make that go down. And just for fun, just to introduce sort of some of the modifiers, let's make these go in the downward direction. Let's go to modifier, create modifier, vector direction, and make it go downwards. Okay. And that is kind of our plant. Now I'm looking here and it looks like our B1 is looking a little long, so let's change that. Right now I had it originally set at 1'2". Let's bring it down to 6 inches. So when I did that, of course it made all my leaves get shorter. So what we need to do is go back to B1, go to our parameter length, and the things that we're using the B1 length to give them properties. The leaves path was getting its length property from B1. So we need to go back and open the length parameter of B1, open up our effects panel, and where we initially said 0 inches to 1'2" because that was our original length that we'd set. We've now changed it to 6 inches, so we'll go 0 inches to 6 inches. And our leaves are normal again. So that's all fine. Those look good, except for if you grow this. So let's go to our stem, and I'm going to go kind of from 0, and I'll start growing it, and the leaves just sort of fan out and look weird. They go out like really fast and look strange. And the reason being is because the width of the leaves isn't tied to the length of the leaves, so we need to do that so they'll grow proportionally. So let's go to the leaves path, and we're going to go to we're going to access our length parameter, effects, and we're going to create a new effect. We want our length parameter to affect, and go down to our width to affect the width. And again, the first thing it does is ask you for the range. By default is 0 inches to 8'4". We want that to be a length of 1 foot, because that's the uppermost limit of our range. And now let's open the factor graph, and really the default is probably just fine again, so we'll just leave that. So now if you go to your stem and you grow your plant, you get tiny little things that come out, then your leaf starts to grow, and so on, and it will just sort of continue to grow. Let's test it again, look, see if there's anything strange. And that looks okay. Looks a little sparse. Let's add some density to B1. Okay, we've done that. So now we kind of more or less have our growing plant. Oops, messed up. And there you go. Now, this looks a little bit stiff. Let's add some modifiers to it. And actually, our stems there, those look a little bit too thick. I'm just going to adjust the shape of these. Let's go to our radius, and let's make those a little thinner. They're still a little bit thick, so let's adjust our minimum radius. Let's set it to 1/64 instead of 6/64. And maybe make that a little smaller. Let's set that to 0. Actually, don't set it to 0. In real life, plants don't ever really have a radius of 0. So I'm trying to avoid zeros. Anyway, so let's add some deviation to this and maybe a vector, and then we'll be done. So let's go to the stem. We're going to adjust stem 1. The plant now grows properly. So if you're watching this just for plant growth, it's doing its job now, so you're good. So now we're going to create a modifier on the stem path, and first thing we're going to do is select a vector orientation modifier, and what this does is it tells the plant which direction is up and which way is down. So right now you have a global vector selected by default. Let's go to our Y orientation, which is also our Z-axis, or axis or Z-axis. Bring that strength up to 100%, and what I've told the plant is now downwards is up and down is sort of the vertical axis of the plant. So that's going to make things correct later on, such as knowing where the top and the bottom of your leaves are. If you have issues with that, a lot of time it's this vector orientation direction that's giving you troubles. So I like to add that to the beginning of every path. Okay, so now we've added the vector orientation modifier. Now let's add a deviation modifier. We want B1 to deviate stem, just so that it looks a little more natural, because in the real world, plant stems, when they grow off other plant stems, they sort of deviate the entire plant. So let's add a deviation direction, and we want the distributed path to be B1. Right now that looks a little bit much. So let's go to also our angle is being given us by the angle of B1, because we have this little guy checked here. So the angle is being given by the child vector. So let's go to B1, and let's change this angle bend. Let's make it a little smaller, I guess. So I've made that angle a little bit smaller, but it's still not making our plant go straight up and down. And so let's add another modifier to this. Let's add a vector modifier, a vector direction modifier. And it's going to be a global vector, and we're going to just tell it to go upwards in the up direction. And that looks good. So anyway, that's a little more realistic. I think now it's everything's been pretty well explained. So let's just look at what we've got again. So I think originally we had a 4-foot plant. Let's do that. So it's nice and big. And as we make that length get smaller, it seems to be doing the right thing. So you've got your twigs come out, and then they make leaves, and it gets bigger. So anyway, that looks good. So let's call that a day. Again, this is what we were shooting for. Now, one thing I kind of don't like about this plant that we just created, and is that it grows up, and then the leaves start. Well, no, I think actually that's fun. The reason why you kind of grow up and then you start to get leaves and they all sort of appear in a bunch. The reason being because of what we did with the in B1 under our length parameter. We had the length affect the length of the leaves from 0 to 6 inches, the length of that being 6 inches. Let's open up our factor graph again. We did this thing where we let the branch kind of grow a little bit before a leaf started to grow on it, so maybe let's take that out. So now it should give us a little more, be a little bit more like that other plant. Anyway, so that's the basics of it, and there's some more advanced topics like growing fruit is a little more advanced, but we can go into that later if anybody needs it. And sort of how you do that, do it the same way you would just have a well, it's hard to explain honestly. You sort of have an invisible stem that you use to grow, because whenever fruit grows, you've got the length of the stem grows up, the plants get to a certain height, and then the plant stops growing, but the leaves continue, or the fruit continues to grow after the initial stem has stopped growing. So that that has to be handled with sort of an invisible secondary stem. But anyway, that's it for now. That's sort of a basic introduction to growing plants, and again, I kind of went into some of the basics of GrowFX too, because it was necessary. But anyway, I hope that you guys learned something, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.